welcome you guys to the, technically supposed to be the 415 mail, apologize for that. But we're going to be interviewing Nathan Honeycutt, who is the current director of TurnAround Ranch, which is our sponsored charity, our featured charity.
Yep. Man, it's great to be here. I appreciate you guys being here.
I appreciate you coming over for it, because I know you were pretty busy with that.
It's been great. I appreciate the support and all the things you guys are bringing today. I'm glad to be here.
Awesome.
Well, yeah, I got questions here, but you know a lot about it too, so like just I'll find an avenue in or whatever you want.
So why don't we open up one of your questions since you actually put some thought into those.
Okay, I'll do the textbook question and then it'll grow into a conversation. That's how it happens. All right. So actually, just a brief introduction on your end, just how you got into your current position, what is your current position, and all that, like more detail.
Very good. Well, my name is Nathan Honeycutt. I'm a licensed professional counselor in the state of Missouri. I am the clinical director for TurnAround Ranch, Ozark Center TurnAround Ranch. We are a facility that works with children between the ages of 10 and 17 that are having behavioral issues and unable to be in public. And so we're helping them to be able to gain skills and learn so that they can get back into the public setting as quickly as possible, sometimes into their biological home, sometimes in a foster home, sometimes in an adoptive home, sometimes in just a lower level type of group home setting. So we're working with them on a daily basis, trying to get them back into a less restricted environment.
Audio okay? I probably got a signal that it's okay. Thank you. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, I've been started TurnAround Ranch in 2012. Worked there as a therapist at their trauma unit for 5 years, and then I ended up going into substance use treatment, and now I'm back as the director starting in February.
All right. Where were you before TurnAround Ranch?
I was a full-time preacher. I was lived in Cassville and was preaching full-time up until 2012. Yep.
All right.
Trying to think of something else.
I mean, I can go on. I got a list here.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. All right. So the TurnAround Ranch. For someone who's not familiar with TurnAround Ranch, what it does, and so forth, how would you introduce that?
Yeah, TurnAround Ranch is kind of the last resort as far as helping children to slow down behavior, slow down things that are going on so that they can get back into public use. A lot of times you'll find schools contacting us. We're also getting contacted a lot by Children's Division with kids that are out of parental control. And so we have 3 programs that we work with. We work with girls between the ages of 10 and 17 in a call it dialectical behavioral therapy modality. We then also have a cottage that works with boys who've sexually acted out, and then we have another cottage with boys that have been through significant trauma, and because of that trauma, their attachment to others is really a struggle for them. And so we're helping them to begin to understand that not all people are bad, and that there are people there that are working to help them grow and to do better. So that's kind of a nutshell. It's a locked facility. We have 3 cottages. We are currently in construction, building new ones. So over the next 3 years, we'll have 3 new cottages. State-of-the-art, brand new stuff, atrium in the middle. It's going to have, you're going to be able to stand inside and outside at the same time, because inside the building will be a plexiglass kind of a tunnel that gets you in the sky. And so it'll just be a really, really cool place.
That sounds really cool.
The new building's really, that is such a step forward. I worked with TurnAround Ranch before we got there. I worked there from 2009 until the fall of 2011. And so, the cottages that were out there, they're very rustic.
Okay, yeah, cinder block walls. That's rustic.
Cinder block walls,
metal doors, mag
very
locks.
square construction.
Yep.
I mean, the staff always did the best they could to kind of make it, when you're at a facility 24 hours a day, make it feel somewhat like home. But there are only so many options with the way the buildings were actually physically constructed. It always,
Because the design, I think, in the beginning was good, and that is we want a facility that cannot be destroyed. Because a lot of our kids physically acting out, they destroy things. And so their thinking or their process at the time isn't about the next 30 minutes. It's about the next 3 seconds. And so tearing that door off the hinges right now sounds good. When I need to use it, close it to go to the bathroom, 30 minutes from now, it doesn't seem to register. And so I think the intent in the beginning was right, but as we have continued to research and understand, environment makes a huge difference. And so if they're in a place that they feel safe and is structured well, but still looks like a home, you get better results. Right. So that's our hope with the new building. We've got a lot of great minds that have went in the building, and so we're just overly excited to get that thing in.
I was really, I guess, chuffed would be the word that you guys get the opportunity to update those buildings, because I've worked not specifically in one of them. I was kind of in all of them, in the position I was in. And just getting to see the difference between there and some of the other facilities that were under the umbrella for some time with transitional one over on 13th Street. And
Yes.
those, like, being able to just, difference in demeanor.
Absolutely.
Kids coming from, like, the ranch to 13th, because there was one of the clients, he got there and his attitude was actually very atypical in that I'm here, I see where this is going, I want to leave. And he jumped in, worked his program just as hard as he could. And I want to say that he was at the time was at the boys' cottage for the ones that acting out.
Yep.
He was there maybe 6-8 months before he hit 13th Street and started working his way back out. Yeah. And I mean, you can actually see it physically in the kids when they change that environment. Like small things like posture and looks in their faces. Sure. Well, that means that sometimes, like, when you get to go home at the end of the shift, you kind of take it for granted.
Oh yeah, you get to go home, they don't. That is our home. And so that's without a doubt. You also have a huge aspect of, you don't want it to be great, because then they want to stay there longer than they need to.
Right.
So it's this fine line between, I want a place that helps them to grow and learn and understand, but I don't want a place that's 5 times better than any place they could go. Right. And they want to stay there forever. Right. So it's this fine line in trying to help them know being out there is a better place to be, but this is a safe place until that happens.
Yeah.
Awesome. So that's the first time it's happened all day. Okay, so what I was going to get at was the kids, right? So the fundraiser we're doing with this convention is to benefit the kids. So I thought we should talk about the kids a little bit. Obviously, nothing in too great of detail, obviously, but I mean, just how would you describe these particular populations that you guys tend to service?
Yeah, due to HIPAA, we are kind of limited on some things. And
right.
So it's kind of an overall general idea with our kids. We have about 30 kids currently. We have a program that also works within the home. And so we could have anywhere from 30 to 40 kids at any given moment in time. And so we're working with a huge demographic in many different regards. But for the most part, these are kids that have been highly traumatized in their life. 99, 100% nearly of the kids we work with have been significantly traumatized by direct family members or people close to them. And so we've got a number of kids that and I know one of your questions will be in a little bit kind of diagnosing things and the things that we're looking at. Right. But there's so many things that if you get a significant trauma in a certain time in your life, it completely eradicates everything. It rewrites our entire infrastructure in our brain. And that infrastructure that's created, no one remembers creating. So it's not a structure in which we build on purpose. It's a structure that was kind of built in a safety mode. And that structure, we have no idea how it got there. It's just there. And so your hopefully later question will let me illustrate that more. But with all of our kids, there's just, I hate to say all, but all of our kids have been through significant trauma. And it's about helping them work through that trauma, manage the symptoms of that trauma. And then on top of that, a number of our kids have true mental health disorders genetically within them. And so we're helping them learn skills on how do you manage that, how do you deal with that, how do you get through those things to be able to make a better choice moving forward.
Right. And actually, you did answer a little bit of the next part of the question I was going to get to, was just the goals of TurnAround Ranch and basically how you achieve them.
Yeah, we're trying to get them in what we call a less restricted environment. Turnaround Ranch is a level 4 in the state of Missouri program, and so we're trying to get them in a less restricted environment. There's level 3s, there's level 2, there's foster care homes, there's biological homes, on the list goes. And so we're trying to get them in a less restricted environment. We want to be able to get them in a place that is more open, more free, as quickly as possible.
Let's see. This is actually going to be off script, which I do a little bit. Like, I did with every guest. I'll do the by the book questions, but then I think of questions while you're talking. And so, you discussed in general the background of a lot of kids. So there's abuse, their past, family, a lot. So I imagine a lot of the kids in the facility are not in the custody of their parents or their families at the time. Sometimes.
Correct. Yeah, we work with both the Department of Mental Health as well as Children's Division, and then the kind of entities that work with them. So some of the kids are out of the homes and they're in Children's Division custody. Some of the kids are using Department of Mental Health funding while the parents continue to be in custody. And so we work with both directions and we work in both areas.
Okay, and I guess I was kind of leading into the next question I was going to go ahead and ask, which was the role of TurnAround Ranch in the broader system of taking care of these kids, like legally and psychologically and clinically. So the kids who are not in custody of their parents, and you were getting into right there. At what point in the process is TurnAround Ranch trying to get them back into a home, or is there any? Do you guys play a role in maybe getting the foster care system or anything like that?
Yeah, it's a great question. So when we're kind of identifying one of the key issues is when do we bring residential in place, and that's been a huge debate over many years to the point that some are saying get rid of all residentials, whereas others are saying, hey, there may be a place here. And so I've always been of the opinion that unfortunately behaviors get to a point where residentials I think will always be necessary. I would love to get myself out of a job. I would love nothing more than to get rid of all residentials. But it's not possible because behaviors aren't being managed the right way many times, or kids aren't being able to get what they need at the right time. And it's no fault to anyone, it just is. And because of that, we're trying to be able to help bridge a gap. And so kids coming into our care are having major behavioral issues, behavioral concerns. We have a substance use program, so those are struggling with substance use as well. And so we're trying to be able to create an environment that helps them slow stuff down so that they can make decisions using their brain, not their emotions.
Right. Critical period for some of these kids with these concerns.
Yeah, because as soon as, when I get traumatized, I'm stuck in a spot until I deal with it. And so no matter what age that is, if I go through a trauma, I've got to deal with that. And if I don't, I'm emotionally stuck there. Physically, my body keeps growing. If I'm traumatized at 7, my body's going to keep looking like an 18-year-old when I'm 18, but my emotions, my thinking, my ability to comprehend is going to get stuck. And so the way I kind of illustrate it is that, our physical life has a continuum, and our life goes and we move and we grow. At any point, what's supposed to happen is your brain and your emotions are going to go with it. And they'll be about the same time. We think of age-appropriate actions, age-appropriate thinking, age-appropriate friends, blah, 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 list goes. But when I get traumatized or I go through a traumatic event, then in that moment, my body will continue its continuum, but my emotional is going to get stymied because that's happened, that has been put, and I may not, and if I don't get the right structure in place in that moment, then I'm going to kind of be stuck there and slowly moving until I get what I need to get this moved back up.
Right.
And when you think about, an 8, 9, 10, 12, 13-year-old who's 3, 4, 5 years emotionally, mentally below that, that is a huge gap. Now, if I'm 40 and act like a 37-year-old, nobody cares. If I'm a 40-year-old and act like a 30-year-old, everybody's going, hey, dude, nice spirit. But if I am a 18-year-old and I'm acting like an 8, that's a problem.
Right, the gap.
And that's what we're trying to work is help them process that traumatic event so that their emotional can build back up their abilities to be able to get where they need to be as fast as they can. Because we're on the clock. I mean, the reality is we are on the clock and it's running fast.
Right, and that's times a resource that is hard to come by, especially for something like this. I was going to ask a question.
Just quick at the end of that, to kind of touch on something that you mentioned earlier about the actions taken by the residents, like they kind of have that, they don't think the 30 minutes ahead. Just what in my experience, what he's talking about kind of manifested. For someone who's never been in that setting or looked at that setting, what does that really mean now? So if you have like a client who's at the 8-year-old level, who has the strength of a 14, 15-year-old, and they make 8-year-old decisions like, oh, I'm just going to hit or push. It doesn't hit or push like an 8-year-old. It hits or push like a 15-year-old. And so that's where he was talking about the facilities needing to be stronger, because sometimes what that looks like when you're having a moment where they've lost control and they're trying to work through it, sometimes that can look like an 8-year-old response hurtling furniture across the room. It's not because they're innately mean or anything else. They're just acting as someone with their experience at that age or at that comprehension level.
Yeah.
So,
and all these companies are always saying, this is indestructible. I'm like, bring it to my cottage.
Yeah.
We'll have that sucker tore up in about 5 minutes. I mean, that's it. I would love to have them. Yeah, come on, test that stuff down here.
Yeah.
Just do what you want, and we'll turn a couple loose and see what happens. Because it can get destroyed in a hurry. Yep.
Like, I think one of the things that I dealt with, because when I was there, my job was more to support staff.
Yep.
And some of the stuff, especially with more novice staff, was that they like, well, how could they do this? And it's like, well, so imagine you're this age and you're permanently that age, and how do you respond in that situation? And just trying to go with the clients and then translate that into something that can kind of you can raise responsibility to people about what's going on out there.
And we're trying to give the skills to be able to kind of illustrate. Many times I'll talk about crayons. When I was a little kid, the first box of crayons was like that 8 box, 8 or 9 box, right? And I loved the day we got a 64 box of crayons. Can you imagine? I was like, holy smokes, where did all this go? Well, it's kind of what we do. We help a kid with 8 crayons learn 64 colors. We help them with 8 emotions, basic, simple emotions to learn. There are a bunch more, and they're kind of divided up. And when you feel this emotion, this is kind of what it's dealing with. And when you start to do that, you start coloring and being able to provide this greater amount of information in their own minds. And this is what my world's like. That's cool.
No, I was going to say, that's a good metaphor. So,
or being able to have, what's the peach, and having turquoise. And when you start thinking about that emotionally speaking, we've created this list for the kids of all the emotions. They're in 5 main basic categories. But there are all these emotions, and I mean, they're just huge lists of emotions that we ask them, all right, what is this? And they'll look through and, well, what's melancholy? Oh, well, let's talk about what that is, They'll be asking, different questions. There was one girl that she put on there, she felt glittery. And so it's like, oh, okay, there we go. That's a good one, who knows, when you might feel a little glittery in a day. So, and so that's the kind of thing you're wanting to help them be able to now communicate. Not just I'm mad, but here's what part of mad I am, or here's what part of sad I am.
The crazy part about like the way you're explaining that, what you're having to help them learn, to differentiate between emotions and stuff. That's stuff like I can think of. I'm teaching my toddler that stuff.
That's exactly.
Yeah, and so that goes back to your point of we're dealing with someone in an adult body almost, but they're way back here, trying to catch them up, right?
Well, and as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to illustrate a little bit. So reactive attachment disorder is one of the DSM-5 diagnoses that in a lot of kids we work with. Is one of the DSM-5 diagnoses that in a lot of kids we work with. Reactive attachment means that there was a traumatic experience that happened to this child between the ages of 0 and 2. So during that period of time, they were traumatized. And so think about like a normal child. When a baby is in their crib and they cry, what happens? Well, mom comes, dad comes. Somebody comes and takes care of them. They cry until somebody fixes it. Well, can you imagine a child crying and nobody fixes it? Nobody comes, nobody fixes it, nobody does anything. The child just cries and cries and cries. Well, the child's learning. It's gaining information. The information it's learning is I'm alone. there's no one coming. When a child cries and someone comes, that's an attachment. That's a connection. I know that if I'm in trouble, there are people that are going to come to me. But if nobody comes, they're like, okay, how do I figure this out now? So from the age of 0 to 2, they're creating their internal belief system of what's true, what's real, what do I do, how do I stay safe? None of us, to my knowledge, remember anything back that far. None of us have a memory that goes back earlier than 2 most of the time. You may have a flash of something, but nobody remembers that.
Right.
So they're developing a complete internal belief system prior to ever being able to remember anything. So now I'm working with a child who's 12, who was traumatized between the ages of 0 and 2. They've developed a system in order to keep them safe, and they can't remember what happened. If they were 12 and something happened at 8, we can process it. Tell me about what you feel, what happened before. Can you compare it? Sure, they built this thing and they tell me all about it. They can't do that when they're 1.
Right. Subconscious.
Yeah, it can't happen. So I'm helping them be able to go against a belief system built that kept them safe for that period of time. And it violates everything within them because that kept them safe.
I think the last few minutes like that, I thought that really well encapsulated, the core of what you guys are trying to address. So, and what TurnAround Ranch does. So I thought we'd go to something, I know you'll know way more about this too than I do, Matt. Just like, so if you're going to do a verbal brochure of what TurnAround Ranch has its facilities, like the services, the room, whatever, the recreational stuff, what all would that include?
Well, I appreciate that because so TurnAround Ranch is its own entity. So we have a gymnasium, we have its own dedicated school that has its own principal, own teachers and everything that come down from Carl Junction. They do a wonderful job with our kids, working with where they're at and all those different things. But on the campus itself, we have a disc golf course. We have a gymnasium. With inside that, we have a basketball court, volleyball court. We also have some rec games that are a couple of pool tables, foosball, those sorts of things. We also have playgrounds. We have 2 of those. We're getting ready to pull another one in, so we're going to have 2 or 3 playgrounds that are there. We have a big place to play softball, kickball. We also have soccer fields that they can play all of those things. We had a tennis court back in the day, but rackets and kids sometimes is a little bit of a challenge. We do play pickleball, so we do have pickleball that we play as well inside. So that's been pretty cool, being able to have that around. So we also do a lot of activities with the kids. So we just got done doing the movies. So we took them to the movies. They got dinner, popcorn, and a movie. And so that was really, really neat that we got to do that. We've got the pool party getting ready to come up. We're going to take them down to the pool in the Osho and let them swim for a few hours. We also have a swimming pool that's like 5 feet. And so we're going to take them to the big pool, let them really get wet.
Right.
And so, but we've got those different things that are there. We do a number of different, we'll go to walk at glades at times and do different things of that nature. We've got some future plans looking at trying to build some things and create some areas that's going to improve that, walking tracks, stuff like that. It's going to be able to help them be able to kind of grow and move in that place.
My knowledge on what was out there 10 years out of date. So.
We have a dedicated rec coordinator. So we have a coordinator that's their job, is to make sure we keep them active. And so that they're looking at all sorts of different ways. We have Gaga Pit. I don't know if you're familiar with that one or not, but
say it.
Gaga Pit.
Can you explain that one?
Yeah. So Gaga Pit is a walled circle. So the walls are about that tall, and there's a kind of the old kickball, the old red and green kickballs. And you have to, everybody's inside the circle, and you have to take it and bounce it off somebody. And so it just goes off, and if you get hit, then you're out. And you're just continuing to throw it, trying to get it off, and it bounces off the walls and everything else like that. So, we also have 9 Square. They love to play as well.
Kind of a follow-up to that, you were talking about some of the opportunities for clients. Sorry, I work at a school now.
It's okay. Yeah, no issues. We're good.
For the clients of the ranch to get to experience life outside of the ranch. Could you talk a little bit about what information you use to kind of inform that decision about, we were talking about not making it too comfortable because you do want to move around.
Right.
What informs your decision about what normal, like what we would take as like for granted as normal life experiences you integrate into their therapeutic regimen to kind of help build them towards, hey, like, if you like this, work towards it, and you can do more of this as you either move to a lower level facility or into the foster care or back to mom and dad, or whatever the situation.
Yeah, that's a great question, and we use a lot. We connect with families as much as possible. So whoever the kind of resource is going to be, whether visiting resource or placement resource, we try to get them out as much as we can. So weekend passes, visits. I'll bring them in and let them do stuff around the campus, let them get kind of used to each other again, figuring out using new skills, connecting into a therapeutic connection. So family therapy, or do the event and then a family therapy if we have to do kind of debrief what happened and things of that nature. But yeah, we've had a couple of kids recently go on family vacations for a few days, come back, how are we doing, how's the processing? We got one kid that we're trying to reunite with family in Georgia, and so he actually flew to Georgia. And so you've got these different things trying to see how do we get them connected to family, or how do we get them to where they want to be. There's the old phrase, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. Well, the rest of that actually says you can lead a horse to water, you can't make him drink, but you can make him thirsty. And that's kind of our point. We try to help make them thirsty for a direction that we know is better, but they don't know.
I actually have two follow-ups.
You're doing good.
Okay, so first follow-up would be, how much does, working with your clients, how much of that is working with the client, and how much of that is also kind of having to work with wherever the caregiver is in their lives? Because, if they've had those traumas, then usually, like, it's somewhere in the course of them acting out or whatever the defensive emotions that they were going through, that affects whatever family unit they can. How much of your client therapy really is ultimately family therapy or everything back together?
That's another good question. I mean, the kids didn't get there by accident. And so sometimes they're in an adoptive home, and the home is a healthy home, but that child's having a hard time seeing this as healthy. And so we're helping not necessarily the family be able to get connected, but the child to see that is a more healthy environment than where you were. The opposite is also true, in which we have kids that really are needing some work, but really the environment they're in is the one that's producing this.
Right.
And so we'll spend a lot of time with that family and trying to understand, hey, do we see how this behavior is connecting to this environment?
Right.
And so a lot of we do family, individual, group therapy, all these different modalities to try to help them do that. And so depending on where and kind of what's going on with that family as to whether we're doing a lot of family therapy or if we're doing a lot of individual therapy, and kind of how are we getting that incorporated together. So every family's different. Every family's going to have to be identified on its own merits.
The other question I had, kind of stemmed from your response, was can you explain kind of the geography of the clients that you serve? You said you have one from Georgia, so it's not like you have 30 clients, all of whom came from Little John.
Yeah, absolutely. So our kids right now, all of them are in Missouri. We had this particular one's got a family member in Georgia, so he went to see if he could go live there. And so we had the other day had someone from Rhode Island send us a packet of a child. We've had Rhode Island, North Dakota, on the list goes. But most of our kids are in Missouri. Our funding comes mostly from Missouri. It gets really, really complicated when you try to cross state lines. Yeah. And so most of our kids, and we have kids from all over the state of Missouri. We do obviously want to work with those that are local first, but when we have openings or spots, we work with anyone that we can be able to help them and improve.
I got a question, but to tee it up first, I just wanted to clarify. So the age group you guys work with?
10 to 17.
10 to 17.
Yeah.
All right. This one I didn't have on the paper since. Just can you tell me of, like, I don't know, you cannot like say anything that's personally identifiable or anything like that, but I mean, is there any kind of like maybe experience you had with one of the clients that just really stuck out to you?
Oh man, we'll be here forever. Probably the first one was always the first one was the best one as far as getting me started. So when I first came into TurnAround Ranch, I was an arrogant person thinking I could talk anybody down. I had enough skills, I had enough abilities, I had enough knowledge. I could talk anyone down. And then there was a 9-year-old blonde-headed little girl to prove that I lost my mind. Me and the house supervisor worked for 2 hours trying to de-escalate that young lady. We have a timeout room. It's a room that has a door that we lock. And the therapist is the only one that can decide when to lock the door. And I worked for 2 hours with Jackie, our house supervisor, every single thing I could possibly come up with to try to not lock the door. And I did everything in my power. I said everything. I did every trick, every single thing I could come up with. I tried it for 2 hours. And Jackie looked at me and says, "Nathan, we have no choice." And so I made the decision to lock the door. And I was mad. I was furious. Not at that girl. I was mad at me because I failed. I failed and I did not keep that door locked. It's my fault that door was locked. I made the decision. I made it. It's my fault. And I was furious, fuming mad. I went back to my office and I sat down. And Jackie came in and she looked at me. She says, "Nathan, some people just can't be talked down. Some people just don't understand how to stop."
You said she was 9.
The girl was 9. Yeah, we had a waiver for her to allow us to be able to go under because it was a brand new cottage, first kid in the cottage. And so we had a waiver to be able to work with her. And it was like, and that was an eye-opening experience. All of a sudden I realized I wasn't all that in a bag of chips, which I needed, but also understanding that not everybody can be talked to.
I mean, you are dealing with human beings who are, the issues they're dealing with are on a whole other level, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you think you got it that day.
Okay. Well, then conversely, that story, again, without too much detail, or personal editorial information, can you think of a happy ending kind of story for it?
Oh, man. One that, as soon as you started talking, there was one particular boy that I remember. He was a boy that was raised in a home with a lot of inappropriate sexual activity between him and his brothers. And there was a lot of stuff. And he didn't understand the difference. He didn't recognize that. He had ended up going to the foster home. When he went into the foster home, he was starting to have some pretty significant concerns. And so he went to his foster mom and he says, "I'm starting to have these thoughts about your daughter." And the foster mom says, "Well, let me see if I can help you." She didn't scream, she didn't yell, she didn't go through the roof. What she said is, "Let me see if I can get you help." He ultimately came to us. And as he and I were chatting one day, he was talking about all these things that happen in his world. And he was talking about, and he was just having all these conversations. And I said, and then he started talking about his life. And I said, "Wow." So I went on my at it. And he read it and looked at me and he looked at it again and he looked at me and he says, "Mr. Nathan, is this true? Is this real?" And I said, "What does it say?" And I wrote on a paper and I gave it to him and it says, "What I have done does not define who I am." And he looked at that and he said, "Is that real?" And I said, "Why don't we talk about it and figure it out?" And so from that point, he ended up going back to that foster family and was able to, and he still contacts some of the staff, doing extremely well, grown up. He's doing really well.
It's really good.
Oh yeah, I get the extremes. It's in everything in between.
I've got a good cap question. Did you want to?
Mine's also kind of cap-ish, so hopefully it flows in yours. All right, so if someone is not in a place in life where they can actually come out and volunteer or work at the ranch, what can they do if they want to contribute? What are the routes that are available to contribute to help the ranch?
That's another great question. So there's different options. We've had a number of people that donated money to say, "Hey, we'd love for the kids to go swimming," or they would love for them to go to the movies. Can we pay for it? Absolutely. No issues there. We also have a clothing room. Sometimes the kids that come in have a trash bag. That's their clothes. And so we have a number of people that will donate clothing to put in our clothing closet to allow for the kids to be able to have things. The natural, the things, underwear, socks, those things we're always trying to find more of those things, right? But those are the types of things, different equipment. The kids love the newest games and things like that. They love board games, so we try to keep as many of those as we can. Books, we can't keep enough books. For Christmas, we always spend a lot of money trying to update their book collection. And so we try to get their library built. The school's got a small library, and so we're all the time trying to put more and more books in there to give them, because they just, so many of them love reading and love those particular things.
Good. Awesome.
My last question, and it kind of inspired by what you type on the paper and to your client.
Yep.
The things you do not define who you are. So I'm gonna like try to formulate the question the entire time. We're gonna read your question.
Do I need to cover one?
Cover me, man. No, I think I got it. Well, it's basically big. Like that is a really powerful statement, and I think it like hits a lot of societal issues. I mean, it does seem like, especially in the teen years and younger years, like the minute you screw up, you get like slapped with a label and irredeemable, right? And then of course the kid owns that, because if you're gonna be treated that way, then you might as well be that, right? So I was gonna say, just from your experiences as a the director of TurnAround Ranch, and just as a person in general working with these kids, I mean, you could change one thing about the way society operates with kids that might help prevent the need for something like TurnAround Ranch. What would it be? And I know that's a super duper profound question. I'm sorry.
You had time to formulate it. Do I have like 6 minutes for me too?
Pat, start
Before the answer. What do you change? Here's one of the things that I think is probably a big key of the whole shooting match is the idea of shame. We understand guilt. Most of us don't understand shame. Guilt is I've done something wrong. Shame is I'm bad because I've done something wrong. We do the labels. We identify this as a bad kid. No, I'm not on that boat. We all do wrong things. But as soon as I start thinking I'm a bad person, it gives me the ability to do bad things. If I understand I have made a decision, I still have a decision to make, life changes. Just because I made that decision doesn't mean I have to make this decision the same.
Right.
And as I see each decision as its own decision, I change my trajectory of life. Because every choice I make changes the next choice or the next step I take.
See, you can handle these amazingly ambiguous questions.
Dun, dun.
That was good. That was good. All right. Well, we are just about at the end of this panel. Which, by the way, a bunch of you walked in like halfway through this panel. This is Nathan Honeycutt. He's the director of the TurnAround Ranch, which is the organization we are donating a good chunk of your ticket sales to support the kids out there. Which I heard that our donation may go to some recreational stuff, like maybe there's a tennis program they want to start out there.
Yeah, cool. We had the tennis courts. We had to tear down some other things because rot got to some of the posts and stuff. But there's a lot of different opportunities that we're looking at, things that we're looking to be able to increase and change. We're looking at amphitheater type thing to be able to help with some activities, some kind of cultural type stuff for them. I would love to have a labyrinth out there one of these days. And so there's a lot of different things that are kind of brainchild that we're in right now.
We're hoping the donation can go to like something like that. It just adds that little like dash of Mark's normal life.
Absolutely. Right. Yeah, we definitely want to be a part of kind of having that conversation because we don't want to just whimsically make decisions. We want to be able to think, okay, what is the best route for this? What can we do? What gives the most bang for the buck?
You? Nathan, thank you for coming out and talking to us, man.
Man, I appreciate it. You guys have just been wonderful, and I thank you very, very much. The kids, thank you. Without a doubt.
No problem. We'll get in touch with you later. Yeah, give us a love.